Hello everyone, I hope you can all hear me out there. I'm just going to take a few minutes to let people join and get any questions together that you might have. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Robyn Vogels. I'm the owner of Personnel Relocations. I'm also the co-author of the book Your DIY Move Guides to Australia. Today's topic for me is a very, very important one. It's one I'm really enthusiastic about. And I think it's one that for most parents, it's probably one of the biggest concerns that you have when you're moving internationally is how are my children going to settle in? How are the schools there? How do they compare? So it is my absolute pleasure to sit here today and chat to you about it, to answer any questions that you might have about moving children, because as a parent myself, I understand how difficult that can be. And I think that's important to note that I am a parent. I've moved my children around the world a number of times. We've even done international moves twice in 1 year. In 2006, we had 2 international moves in 1 year, and I understand and sympathize with parents who are moving their children internationally. And I would like to say from the onset that we worry a lot more than what the children do. We are the ones that are worrying about, will they make friends? Will they settle in? To be honest, children live in the moment, and from my own experience, they bounce pretty well. They deal with things really well. And I really want to reassure parents that as much as you might feel this is scary, moving your children around the world, you're only scared of what you don't know. So today I hope to cover some points on how you can research what you can do before you arrive and how you can prepare the children. So for those that have just joined me, I'm Robyn. I'm the owner of Personnel Relocations. Moved my own family around the world a number of times, and I've been welcoming many families over the last 12 years to Australia. So I'll share with you some of the personal insights that I've had today. I do feel like I'm only touching the surface on this topic today. I feel like I could really sit and talk about a number of things in a lot more depth. So I do encourage you to get involved, ask me questions that are specific to you, or feel free to contact me afterwards if you have something specific that you'd like to ask. So today I'm going to be going through some of the school options that you have available to you in Australia, the difference between those options, so the different schooling streams, the costs, the budget, what you can do to shortlist and prepare prior to your arrival, preparing the children for their move, helping them settle in, and at the end I'll take any questions. But yes, as I say, I feel like I'm just scratching the surface today. And some of the things that I'll talk about today we might feel are quite obvious, but as parents I think sometimes we also just need to be reminded of what children need and how we can support them. So kicking off with schools in Australia, as with everything in Australia, there's a number of names for just about anything. So it can be quite a minefield when you're trying to Google, because you will see things like ELC, kindy, secondary school, high school. There's different names for everything, and these names can change depending on which state you're in as well. So each state will have different rules and regulations. So I do encourage you to check with your education authority in the state that you'll be moving into. But something like an ELC is Early Learning Centre. You tend to find those in the private sector, and they will take the children up until school age. We have 3 main streams of schooling in Australia. You have the state or the government schools, you have semi-private, and you have fully private schools. There's quite a difference between all of them. In most states, and also depending on the visa that you're on, the state schools or the government schools will be free. So places like Victoria, even if you're on a temporary visa, the education is still free. New South Wales, for example, if you're on a temporary visa, so that might be a 2 or a 4-year visa, the schooling is not free. And you would pay a similar fee to what you might pay at an international school or a fully private school. So state government schools are free. Then you have the semi-private schools. So semi-private schools tend to be the schools that are affiliated with one religion or another. So they're religious affiliated schools. And they are half subsidized by the government, usually by a little bit by the churches, and school fees are paid. And then you have a fully private school. So fully private schools don't receive any government or very little government funding, and they'll be more expensive for you as a family. Now, the structure within those schools also changes, and like I was saying earlier, the names. So in a private school, you will have a junior school, middle school, and senior school. Whereas in the state system, you'll have primary school and then secondary school or high school. So high school generally starts here when the child is between 12 and 13. So usually their 13th birthday, they'll start high school. In most states, children need to be in school by their 6th birthday. So celebrating their 6th birthday in school, that's when you start. And school in most states goes up to the age of 16, it's compulsory up to the age of 16, although you're usually 18 in year 12, which is the final year of school. So you do have the option to leave school. Is no longer compulsory after the age of 16, but generally school here goes up to year 12, which is normally your 18th birthday. Okay, so just coming back to the different structures again, you have in the state schools, so I'm just going to run through some of the differences between those three streams. So the three streams I've spoken about are your state schools, your state schools being your fully government funded schools, your semi-private schools, which are usually religious based, and your fully private or independent schools. Okay, so things to consider with the schools. If you're going to a state school, most of the schools are zoned by area. Now the zone can change. It can be anything from a 2 kilometer to 5 or 10 kilometers. And the tighter the zones are, the closer to the city you are, the tighter the school zones are. As you move away from the city, your school zones expand. If you're living within a school zone, the school is obliged to take your child. Okay, so that is for state schools. If you're choosing a private school, there's no school zones, and most semi-private schools do not have school zones either. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility when you're trying to find a house or you're trying to choose a school. Another thing to note with the schools is the cost. So here in Victoria or in New South Wales, I would say even Adelaide, for a fully private school, you could be looking at anything between $8,000 to $15,000 per term. For a semi-private school, you're probably looking between $5,000 and $8,000 per year. And government schools are funded by the government in most states. As I said earlier, New South Wales and South Australia, it's not usually the case, depending on your visa status. So there is a big consideration around budget. You also, with some schools, will be needing to put money aside when you start for school uniform. So for a private school, you could be looking at as much as $800 for private school uniform. Okay, for state schools, I would estimate you'd budget in around $300 to $400 for a state school uniform. So keep that in mind when you're planning your budget. Some schools require that you bring your own device. So you might see it on their website. It's BYOD, bring your own device. And they'll stipulate what the specifications need to be for that device. So whether that's an iPad or a laptop. So that, again, more considerations when you're choosing which stream of school you want to go into. The differences between those schools really comes down to facilities. A lot has to do with facilities. It's to do with subject choices. I mean, obviously in a private school, you might find that they have a bigger athletics oval. They might have more tennis courts, more basketball. They'll have their own swimming pool. In the state system, it could be that they use the local community swimming pool. that they have a much smaller athletics ground, but they use the community sports fields as well. So it's not perhaps as convenient as what you might have in a private school, but the facilities are still there. If you are looking for subject options, again, you need to look at perhaps the private school sector. You're going to have a lot more options for different subjects, especially when you're getting into high school years. So that's a bit of an overview of the different streams of schools and what you can get, what the main differences are. So I've gone through the budgets with you, how much you could expect to pay in school fees, in school uniforms, and what you can expect. I think the teaching is, it's always a tricky one to decide on, because at the end of the day, it does depend on the particular teacher your child gets. And I must be honest, there is a difference, obviously, between the standard of teaching between private schools and state schools, but we've had really good experience even in the state schools with the teacher. It really does come down to the teacher that your child is with, and I think to a certain point the amount of effort you put in as a parent when you first arrive to make sure that there's a balance between what your child has been taught and what they're being taught now. So let's move on to choosing a school. There are things that you can do prior to your arrival. It's very hard without a relocation consultant or somebody on your side to be able to give you the feel. And you all know what I mean when we talk about the feel. You really need to walk around a school when the school gates are open and the children are there, so you can get a proper feel for the school. But there are things that you can do prior to your arrival. So what I would say first is start with yourself. And I know that sounds really strange, but start with yourself and understand what you want from the school. Make a list, sit with your child even and make a list of what values you're looking for in school, what family morals you have, what are you looking for as far as an education is concerned. Are there specific subjects that you need? Okay, so make a list. Is the size of the school important to you? Okay, is the population of that school going to make a difference? Are you looking for a smaller, more nurturing school, or is your child used to the international busyness of a school? Obviously, as I spoke about just now, budget needs to come into it. So decide on your stream of school, and most people are able to decide that on budget. I would say that a lot of people in Australia actually put their children in state primary schools and move them into private schools later on. So, look at that as an option. When you first arrive, cost and unforeseen circumstances is a big issue. So the state system is very, very good. So budget will help you choose size of school, the opportunities you're wanting for the child. So that might be sporting opportunities or other co-curriculum activities that they're involved in. There's a few ways to start your research, and I'm going to start off by talking about rankings. I get a lot of people who contact me and say, I want this school because of the rankings. The rankings are the best. It looks like the best school. That doesn't mean that school is right for your child. So again, like I said, go to the start with looking at what you want first of all, before you look at the rankings. When you looking at those rankings, they can be, how can I say, they're not rigged, but they can be misinterpreted. And I think there's a few websites. So Better Education has a ranking which is only based on English and maths. Okay, that might give you a bit of a guideline. Another one that I particularly like is the My School website, so myschool.com.au. Let me explain My School a little bit to you. So My School is based on NAPLAN results. Now NAPLAN is the national testing that they do here. So every May, every single student in year 3, 5, 7 and 9 sits the same exam for their year level, And they sit the same exam across the country. So that doesn't matter if they're in a government school, semi-private or private school, they all sit the same exam. Okay, so NAPLAN tests are the best way to gauge and the most accurate way to gauge the school. But don't just look at the NAPLAN tests. If you go onto the My School website, you can actually see the statistics. And I think that's more important, because you want to see the graphs of a few years to be able to understand if that school's just had a bad year, or whether there's an upward trend or obviously a downward trend in their NAPLAN results. Because a school that's got a downward trend in its NAPLAN results probably isn't going to be a best bet for you. You can also use that My School website. If you go onto the graphs page, you can not only look back a few years, but you can see how they are comparing to schools that are similar. Okay, so the My School website has a lot of that information. What's also great about the My School website is on the front page, you can actually see the school population. You can see the teacher ratios. So those things you need to take into consideration. So coming back to those ranking websites, they might not be everything though. I think you really need to look at the population. You really need to look at the curriculums the schools offer. But they're a good starting point to narrow your search down. Okay. Then it's time to move on to the actual school websites. Now, you need to remember that school websites are there as a marketing tool. Okay, they're not there to tell you things that you don't want to hear. They're there to be a marketing tool. Coming back to that list I said to you to make in the beginning, which is about looking at yourself first and understanding what you want, what your family values and morals are. Have a look at the principal's message on the school website. Does that sit well with what you're looking for? Okay. Read the school newsletters if they're online, and most schools these days should have their newsletters online. Reading the newsletter gives you an insight as to the language the school's using. Are they actually going forward with what they promise on the website? So if they say we have school awards, or we have athletics days, or we have swimming carnivals, that sort of information should be in the newsletter. So make sure it is there, and that it's not, the newsletter is not a marketing tool. You can actually get a feel for the school. The culture of the school comes across well in a newsletter. If you're reading a school newsletter and they're talking a lot about bullying, or they're talking about domestic violence, family violence at home, is that just a one-off? Read a few newsletters and see if that was just something they were focusing on for that week, or it might be a reoccurring problem within the school. Okay, so read the school newsletters. The other thing to consider when shortlisting schools is the language other than English that they teach. Okay, so a lot of schools will choose an Asian language. Does that sit well with you? Is that in your child's best interests? Okay, so it's called LOTE, L-O-T-E, language other than English. And again, you can find that on the website. And just see if that's in line with what you want, whether you want maybe a European language or you want an Asian language. And I will emphasize that at primary school here, it's very much a cultural learning as opposed to learning the actual language. So if you've got primary school age children, I wouldn't be overly concerned about the LOTE, but just it gives you again another idea of the culture of the school. If you've got high school children, you definitely need to be looking at the subject choices that are available. Okay, so those are all the things that you can look at on a school website to help you shortlist even further. So use the ranking websites, but use them carefully, take them with a pinch of salt, and look at all the other information you can get on those ranking websites about the school. Look on the school website, read the principal's message, read the newsletters, and look at the subject offerings. Okay, school websites, school zones, are also very important, obviously, when you're shortlisting, and I spoke about the zones earlier. Most State schools are very reluctant to handle any inquiries from international families. Probably reluctant isn't the right word to use. I would say state schools don't have an admissions officer. They don't have somebody who's working purely on enrollments. In the private and semi-private sector, they do. And then you can ask all the questions you like, okay, before you arrive. Or if you've got any questions about their LOT or their subject choices, there will be an email address under enrollments. But when you're looking at the state schools, they don't have a marketing budget, okay, because the state schools are working within a zone. They are obliged to take your child if you're living in their zone. So they don't have a marketing budget. They don't have anybody looking after it. It's usually somebody, one of the secretaries or receptionist, who deals with the enrollments. So don't be offended and think, I'm not going to like that school because they haven't answered me. If it's a state school, you're really not going to get much out of them until you arrive in Australia with a lease in your hand and can show that you're living in their zone. Once you're living in their zone, the doors will be open and they'll be happy to receive you, but they're really not usually going to answer too many questions from you before you arrive. But don't let that put you off. Okay. So just wrapping up on the school choices, make a list of what's important to you as a family and sit with your child and work out that list. Consider the budget and which stream of school that you want to go to. Use the NAPLAN results and the ranking systems to shortlist, but check the website and evaluate the key messages. Okay? So preparing children for the move. Now I could probably sit here and talk for half an hour on various age groups and things you can do and can't do and should do and shouldn't do. But I'll try and just give a bit of an overview of the important things. And as I said at the beginning, some of these things might seem obvious, but sometimes as parents, we just need a reminder to take a step back. We need a reminder to be good listeners and to understand that children have very different priorities to what we have. We need to remember that our mindset and that we are setting an example for the children. So if you are stressing about everything and being really vocal about all your concerns, your child is going to get anxious. You need to be really careful about what you say in front of the children. So, for example, if children need the facts, they want to know the boundaries, they want to know how things are going. If you're still perhaps you're still negotiating a work contract, keep those conversations with your partner until the children have gone to bed. It's no good involving them or letting them overhear all the concerns that you might have with a work contract, for example. When to tell the children is again depends on their age. I would probably, for most ages, for teenagers, you need to give them some time to really digest it. So give them quite a bit of heads up, even 6 months if you can. Giving them an idea first that you might be moving. And then, yes, we are moving. This is what we're going to deal with the facts with them. For younger children, they don't always have a concept of time. So whether you might say, okay, well, we're going to be moving in 3 months' time, that could feel like next week to them. So the timing of when to tell the children is very much depends on their age and their maturity. But definitely try and keep to the facts. Definitely involve the children in everything you're doing. When you're deciding to move overseas, sit down and reevaluate your family rules. Okay, because your whole family circle and everything you're doing at the moment is about to be thrown up in the air, and a lot of challenges are going to be thrown your way. Having family rules and those boundaries in place keeps the children a lot more settled. Okay, they need the boundaries. They need to know that on Sunday we're still going to eat at the table. Whatever it might be, you still need to unpack the dishwasher. That's still your chores. Family rules are very important, and I think in the beginning of it you need to make sure that everybody understands what the family rules are, because those are not going to change. Children need those boundaries. It's a sense of familiarity to them as well, which is important. I do think, though, again, depending on the age of the child, sometimes you need to be a little bit flexible. So I'll come on to it just now when you're actually settling the children, but there does need to be some flexibility, and choose your battles, as I would say. Your mindset, you need to lead by example. Is this an adventure, or is it feeling like the worst thing in the world that could happen to you? Because your children are going to be looking at you for those key indicators. So make sure that you're clear in your mindset, how you're feeling about the move and what you're expressing in front of the children. Be a good listener. Okay, and I've touched on this a few minutes ago, in that we have different priorities, and I know that we're moving and we've got removals quotes and we've got packing and we've got everything else to do, but your child might be really worried about just their teddy bear being in a dark box, and that's a very easy thing to fix. I know my daughter was very worried about how Santa Claus was going to get into our new house, but sitting and talking to your children in advance and helping them to understand what Australia is like. There's some great books out there even about Australia. You can, or even looking online, sit with them in the evening and say, okay, well, tonight we're going to look at what foods they have in Australia. And let's see what's happening in Melbourne this week and what we can do when we arrive. Oh, there's an ice skating rink, or look at the Melbourne Zoo. What about this, the zoo in Sydney? So you start building up a bit of a picture for the children, and by sitting with them and looking at those things and having a different topic each night helps them understand what they're going to, but also helps them to talk to you about what they might be worrying about. Okay, have a look at the schools in the area. If your child is quite young, have a look at the schools and say, what do you think about this school? What do you think about this sport? Do you like that school uniform? Just opening the questions, because sometimes children don't know where to start with asking questions, and then they just bottle things up and build a little wall around them, and you can't get through to them. So be a good listener, and just remember that they have a very different perspective to what you have about what Australia might be like. You as a parent are probably definitely worrying about, are they going to settle in? Are they going to cope? Are they going to understand their teachers? They haven't even thought that far yet. Okay, they've got a very different idea of what is lying ahead of them. And more times than not, you being more of a pessimist than what they're going to be. They're probably quite excited about most things. And if they're not, you can certainly influence them quite easily. So yes, definitely spend some time, look at maps with them, look at the beaches, look at photographs, look at food, anything that would encourage them to talk and for you to understand what they're feeling and what they're thinking. And I think that goes for any age group. Just spend that time and be a good listener. One thing I would definitely say for any child moving to Australia is, and especially if you're coming to Victoria, to Melbourne, you need to understand footy. So that's Australian football rules. It's unique to Australia, I'd say that much. And it is the playground conversation, especially if you've got a boy. They have to understand what footy is about, or have a vague idea. Choose a team, even if you choose a team by colour, because what happens is when the boys get together, the first thing they're going to say to your son, who do you barrack for? So that means which footy team do you support? Okay, so who do you barrack for? That is what every boy is going to be asked a number of times in his life in Australia. And pretty much if he said, oh, I barrack for St Kilda, they would be like, oh, okay, Rupert's with St Kilda, go over there. And that is his social circle. That is how they determine the social circles. You don't have to know the intricacies of the game, but definitely choose a team. Okay, choose a team, whether it's by colour, by a name, anything you like. If you've got a son, make sure he knows that he's going to be asked that question, who do you barrack for, and that he has a team. Okay, because he just won't be part of the playground conversation if he doesn't know those two things. Another thing to do in advance before you leave your country, especially if it's your home country, so I'm not talking about expatriates who maybe moved a number of times, but if you're leaving grandparents, aunts, uncles, very close family, friends behind, is make sure that you set up ways to correspond with them, okay, especially grandparents. Make sure you've set up a Skype for them, and that every Sunday night they might read to the kids over Skype. So have those in place, not only for the child's sake, but for the grandparents' sake as well. Okay, so definitely put measures in place and make sure everybody understands how Skype works, and that's what you might be doing. Every Sunday night, 6 o'clock is good on the time zone. We'll chat then, or we'll do a bedtime reading, whatever it might be. We might cook all together or anything like that, but just make sure that those are set up. There's nothing worse when I hear a parent say to a child, when a child said, "Oh, I miss my friends," and the parent says, "Oh, don't worry, you'll make new ones." They don't want to make new ones, and friends should never be disposable. Okay, so make those plans in advance so that your child also knows that he will still be talking to his friends, his grandparents, his aunties, uncles. Just friends are not disposable, and they'll make new friends, yes, but it doesn't mean they're going to lose their own friends. So just watch the context in which you say that. Helping children settle in. So definitely the most important is managing their expectations. And I think managing their expectations for those first few weeks is very important, because if you've sat and you've researched food and things to do and what you're going to do in Melbourne or Sydney or Adelaide, wherever you're going, the kids get excited and they want to go and do that now, but they need to remember that you still need to find a house, find a school. There's going to be a lot of driving around in the first few weeks, perhaps some shopping, in fact probably a lot of shopping. So manage their expectations that for the first few weeks this is what we're going to be doing, so that they understand when they get here, okay, we're going to be strapped in the car for a few hours each day. Just remember that children do live in the moment, and I spoke about that just now, so don't let your stresses overwhelm them. Try and manage those stress levels when you're around the children, and I think a lot of that comes into play by planning things in advance. On my website there is a download for a checklist. Download the checklist, add to it, make your own, get boxes ready, plan in advance as much as you can, because that will reduce your stress levels closer to move day. Also, what I would definitely say is plan the goodbyes, because people tend to bring you goodbye gifts, or at the last minute they say, "Oh, you're leaving next week, I have to catch up with you." And there's nothing, it's lovely, wonderful that people want to do that, but it's very stressful. And there's nothing more stressful than somebody coming with a gift that you then need to try and squeeze into a suitcase. So plan your goodbyes, plan those goodbye parties, not only for the children's sake, but for your peace of mind and your sanity. And I think also when you try to help children settle in, is understand that they're going to be very, very tired for the first few weeks. Even if your child is not speaking English as their home language, they're going to be twice as tired. So please just, bend the rules a little bit now and again if you have to. Choose your battles, but understand that they're going to be tired. If you think about them in the classroom situation or them at school, there's no child wants to be the one standing out for the wrong reasons. So they're going to be watching how everybody carries their school bag. How do they actually wear their school uniform? What's in their lunchbox? The whole time their head is just watching and taking in information. You might find that they're very quiet, and that is because they're just busy digesting all these new things, because they don't want to be the new kid that looks stupid. Okay, so just please be patient with them, choose your battles, and understand that they're going to be very, very tired for those first few weeks. And sometimes we forget that. We're excited that they're home from school and we want to discuss everything and chat about it. They just want some quiet time. I would highly recommend that the parents make an appointment with the school, at least, or sorry, with the teacher 3 months after your arrival. Your child might be looking like they're tracking okay, but it's always a good idea to check in with the school, because if you take mathematics, for example, there might be different ways of working out the sum of something. There might be different terminology involved, and that might be worrying your child, or they might be slipping back because they don't understand that terminology. You are that link that can help the teacher and the child understand, oh, that word is this word in our country. Okay, so make that appointment. Even if you think that everything's okay, make an appointment with the school teacher, go through some of their books together and make sure that they are actually on the right track and understanding everything. I'm going to have a quick look and just see if there's any questions here. Give me 1 second. Technology is not my... Okay, so somebody's... Your general ELTS is an English test. That's for a visa. Sorry, I can't see your name, but I can see your question there. So you need to get in contact with a person who can provide a visa, and they will walk you through the ELTS tests which are needed for your visa. Any other questions on there? Okay, I think that's all right. Okay, I can't see any other questions. So I'm just going to close off by saying, as I said at the beginning, is that this was a very, scratch the surface as far as relocating with children is concerned. I've tried to touch on many, many subjects, and I could probably sit and talk about each subject in a lot more detail and talk about children when you're repatriating. That's a very, very big thing. Repatriating with children, again, just what you expect and what the child expects are two very, very different things. So if you have missed anything, this is the book that we have written. Sorry, I'm not getting that to the screen. It is available on Amazon as an ebook and a paperback. And I've gone into a lot more detail regarding children there. Migratory loss and grief, self-care for you and your family, new family rituals and celebrations, Aussie slang and local ways. Those are all very, very important to help the children integrate and for yourself. So as I say, I've scratched the surface today, but there is plenty more information out there. Feel free to email me. The email address for Personnel Relocations is info@personnelrelocations.com.au. Let me just put that in the comments. Info at... Okay, that's our email address. If you need to get in contact with me or you have another quick question, I'm always happy to talk about children or your relocation needs. I also offer consultations if you just need a Skype call to check that you're on track, or you want to check it's something in particular. You can book consultations with me on our website. Otherwise, a full relocation program. The book is there as well to just help guide you. And the book has everything in it, from children to moving quotes to absolutely everything you might need. One more question. Zoe, I missed the first part. Can I see it later? Yes, this will be on the Personnel Relocations Facebook page, and I also will have it on the YouTube channel. We have a YouTube channel on Personnel Relocations, so that will be there for you to see. But thank you for joining me. If you are watching this after the live event, please feel free to email me. I'm always happy to take any questions. I wish you the best of luck with your relocation journey, and do get in touch if I can help you with anything. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.